In 1648, terrified cries ricocheted off the marble halls of Topkapi Palace as Gulbaha Hatan was dragged toward the dark waters of the Bosphorus. But that's not even the most shocking part of this story. What you're about to discover will upend everything you thought you knew about life behind Ottoman palace walls. I'm about to reveal 3 punishment methods so savage, so deliberately cruel that for over 4 centuries, historians have kept them hidden. First, you'll see how suspected unfaithful women were sewn alive into weighted sacks and hurled into the Bosphorus, yet this was considered merciful. Next, you'll witness the iron cage lined with fishhooks where victims were suspended for days, their own weight slowly tearing them apart. And finally, the most terrifying punishment of all, so psychologically shattering that even veteran executioners dreaded it. But here's the part no one talks about. The real scandal wasn't only the torture itself. It was how European historians systematically erased these accounts to shape their story of civilized versus barbaric empires. If you're ready to uncover truths they tried to bury, keep watching because by the time you finish, you'll understand exactly why these records were suppressed for centuries. Picture this. It's 1650. The Ottoman Empire stretches from Vienna to Yemen, ruling 3 continents. But here's what your history book never told you. Power wasn't in the Sultan's hands alone. The imperial harem wasn't the perfumed paradise shown in movies. It was a ruthless political machine where hundreds of women battled for survival and influence. The Sultan's mother, the Valid Sultan, wielded more authority than most European monarchs. One wrong step, one whispered rumor of betrayal, and you could face punishments that made medieval dungeons seem luxurious. For generations, Orientalist writers painted the Ottoman court as exotic and mysterious, all silk curtains and gardens. They ignored the system of brutality because it didn't suit their narrative of European superiority. What you're about to learn comes from actual Ottoman imperial logs, Venetian diplomatic reports, and archaeological finds uncovered during 20th century restorations. These aren't myths. These are recorded facts that have been carefully concealed. Imagine you're a concubine in 1648. After years clawing your way up the palace hierarchy, you finally catch the Sultan's eye. Then someone poisons his ear with whispers of disloyalty. In moments, your world collapses. What happened to women like Gulbaha Hatan when suspicion fell on them? What you're about to hear will overturn everything you believed about palace life, about history itself, and about who gets to tell the stories that survive. Don't look away now. The first punishment I'm about to reveal was only the beginning. Let's return to that night in 1648. Gulbaha Hatan, once the Sultan's prized favorite, trembles in the palace dungeon. Her alleged crime, infidelity with a palace guard. Her sentence, the keys, the drowning sacks. And here's a chilling truth about Ottoman record-keeping. They documented everything. Executioner logs from the 1650s describe the process in horrifying detail. First came the stripping, then the humiliation. Palace servants jeered and spat as executioners shoved her into a thick leather sack. But here's the truly sadistic detail. They didn't just toss her in. They stitched her inside while she was still conscious, the coarse cord cutting into both the leather and her skin as she writhed. Imagine you're in that sack. The leather clings to your body. Air is scarce. Every movement makes the cord bite deeper. Above you, the executioners chat about the weather and dinner plans as though you're already gone. Then the weights are added, stones tied to the bottom to drag you down. The records show exactly 47 pounds were used. Why 47? It was just enough to pull you under, but not enough to kill you instantly on. Impact Venetian ambassador Giovanni Sarance secretly witnessed one such execution in 1656. His report describes screams bubbling up from beneath the water for nearly 2 minutes before silence. And here's what's even darker. This wasn't rage or impulsive vengeance. It was calculated theater. The Sultan needed other concubines to see exactly what disloyalty cost. The splashing, the screams, the bubbles, all of it was designed to echo through the palace corridors as a warning. You're probably thinking this was the worst fate imaginable. You'd be wrong. Drowning sacks were considered merciful because death came relatively fast. Executioner logs state this explicitly. Drowning was reserved for lesser infractions. But what about serious betrayals? What punishment awaited those who truly threatened the Sultan's power? Don't turn away yet. The next method took place in hidden chambers. Most palace residents never knew existed. This next torture was so horrifying that even hardened executioners begged to be reassigned rather than perform it. Deep beneath Topkapi Palace, in rooms absent from any tourist map, stood what Venetian records called La Gabbia Infernale, the infernal cage. Picture an iron cage about 6 feet high and 4 feet wide. Every bar lined with enormous fish hooks, not the small kind but massive iron hooks used to catch sharks in the Black Sea. The victim was stripped naked and locked inside, forced to stand perfectly still in the center, surrounded by hundreds of razor-sharp points. But here's the true horror. They weren't trying to kill quickly. The cage was designed so that if you stood perfectly still, the hooks wouldn't touch you. The torture was waiting, knowing that one tremor, one moment of weakness, would shred your flesh. Ambassador Lorenzo Bernardo's secret correspondence from 1580 describes witnessing this punishment. The condemned woman stood motionless for 6 hours before her legs began to shake. The first hook caught her shoulder blade. Her scream echoed through stone corridors. I pray never to walk again. Now picture yourself inside that cage. Your legs cramp, your back burns, your muscles spasm. Any movement risks iron tearing your skin. Above you, palace life continues as if nothing is happening. And here's the cruelest twist. The cage was placed directly beneath the harem's main dining hall. Every gasp, every whimper, every time the hooks found flesh was heard by the women eating above. It was a constant reminder of what disloyalty meant. Venetian records show victims typically lasted 18 to 24 hours, not from blood loss. The hooks were arranged to inflict maximum pain with minimal bleeding. They died from exhaustion, from the unbearable strain of holding still while their own muscles betrayed them. But here's what nobody tells you about palace politics. This wasn't mindless cruelty. The cage was reserved only for women who posed real political threats, concubines who tried to poison rivals, those who slipped secrets to foreign envoys, or anyone who dared challenge the Valid Sultan's authority. Think that was the worst of it? You're not ready for what comes next. At least the cage offered a slim chance of survival if you were strong enough. The Sultan's most feared psychological torture stripped away even that hope. This method was so horrifying that when French archaeologists uncovered proof of it in the 1920s, they hesitated to publish their findings. In 1923, French archaeologist Henri Prost made a discovery at Topkapi Palace that haunted him forever. During restoration of the Eastern Wall, workers uncovered human skeletons sealed inside the masonry. These weren't ancient burials, they were executions. The most chilling detail? The bones revealed these people had been entombed alive. Finger bones were worn down to splinters from desperate scratching. Skulls showed fractures from smashing against stone. Carved into the walls were markings and pleas etched with fingernails. And it wasn't random. Palace records show this punishment was reserved for the gravest betrayal, attempts to assassinate the Sultan or his heir. The ritual itself was cruelly deliberate. First, the victim was forced to watch as the mortar was mixed. Then came the most twisted part. They had to step into the cavity willingly because refusal meant their entire family would share their fate. Executioner logs note that victims were given a small oil lamp designed to burn for about 4 hours. Imagine being sealed inside that wall with only 4 hours of flickering light to grasp the horror of your situation. You could hear the masons outside laughing as they laid stone after stone. Then the lamp sputters out, and you're left in total darkness with just enough air to linger for days. The evidence shows victims lasted 3 to 5 days. How do we know? Palace servants testified that faint tapping was often heard from inside the walls long after the executions. The Sultan himself sometimes held audiences in rooms where that tapping could be heard, making sure everyone understood what defiance truly cost. French archaeologist Robert Mantrin's 1965 analysis revealed the most disturbing discovery of all: teeth marks gouged into the stones. Victims bit the masonry with such force that they shattered their own teeth trying to escape. But the story grows even darker. In 1959, Turkish historian Halil İnalcık uncovered documents in the basement of a demolished Istanbul house that changed everything. These records proved European historians hadn't simply ignored the methods, they had actively worked to bury them. The most damning revelation wasn't found in the Ottoman archives. It was in the correspondence between 19th-century European historians and Ottoman officials. They weren't just documenting history. They were negotiating which parts would survive. Here's the scandal almost no one mentions. European Orientalists deliberately hid evidence of Ottoman torture because it didn't match their narrative. Why? Because admitting Ottoman sophistication in cruelty would force them to confront the same realities in their own empires. At the very same time, the British were refining torture in India, the French were experimenting with psychological warfare in Algeria, and the Spanish were carrying out living burials in the Americas. By pinning barbarity on the Ottomans alone, European scholars could position their own empires as civilized by comparison. Dr. Inalcik's findings revealed a systematic campaign. The British Museum acquired, and later lost, key Ottoman execution logs. The French National Library classified torture records as too sensitive for the public. German Orientalists published sanitized accounts of palace life, stripping out references to systematic punishment. And the result? Centuries of stereotypes. By framing Ottoman cruelty as Oriental despotism rather than calculated political control, European historians built the very narrative that later justified colonial rule. The reality was there all along. Ottoman court records were obsessively detailed. This was an empire built on bureaucracy, not chaos. But European scholars cherry-picked passages that fit their despotic East versus civilized West storyline. Modern. Turkish historians like Baki Tezkan and Günhan Borekçi have spent decades piecing together these suppressed accounts. What they've uncovered is even more disturbing than the methods themselves. These practices weren't unique to the Ottomans. They were part of a universal system of imperial brutality. The drowning sacks, Russians used them against Cossack rebels. The cage of hooks, French prisons employed similar designs. Living burials, Spanish Inquisition records describe identical punishments. By assigning them exclusively to the Ottomans, European historians preserved the illusion of moral superiority. The conspiracy wasn't just about hiding Ottoman cruelty. It was about concealing the fact that every empire relied on the same systematic terror to maintain control. Today, suppressed Ottoman records are finally being digitized and translated. Turkish scholars, alongside international teams, are rebuilding the full picture. And what they're finding shows the truth. Every major empire of the 16th and 17th centuries weaponized torture as a tool of power. The question was never why the Ottomans were so cruel. The real question is why we've been taught they were uniquely cruel, when in reality, imperial brutality was the rule everywhere. The drowning sacks, the hook cages, the living burials, every empire had its version. And here's the chilling connection to our present. Historical narratives are still being shaped and sanitized today. Which empire's brutality is being softened in modern textbooks? Which truths are being buried because they don't fit today's political agendas? The Ottoman Empire may be long gone, but the fight over who controls history is still very much alive.